Today I'm making some classic pub food, a little meal of my favorite things. Some soup with some blistering tomatoes and melted mozzarella cheese oozing over the top, and with it, a hamburger. Now I start by blistering some fresh tomatoes in a little bit of canola oil. So I cut an X in the bottom and I core the top. That allows air to pass from one end of the tomato to the other, which means while I'm blistering them, the skin is gonna come off a little bit, get charred, and give my soup this added intensity. I'm gonna use my trusty cast iron skillet, and I'm gonna get it roaring hot. I think food is a lot about the weather. If it's cold outside or it's rainy, it makes me wanna make a soup that feels like I'm putting on a jacket. So I can hear that crackling sound of the skin. Let's give him a little flip and see what's happening. Now, the really cool thing about this technique is it stems from watching my mom char peppers on the burner. She would just throw a pepper right on the burner, turn it up high, char the whole thing, and that wonderful smoky smell of the skin charring was so appetizing to me. This soup recreates that feeling, but chars the skin of tomatoes instead. So once the skin starts to come off the tomatoes and peel away and char a little bit, that's when I add 1 tablespoon of regular sugar. Tomatoes that are fresh like this have more acidity, but they need that little secretarial assistance, that pinch of sugar for added sweetness. Now to cook them and finish cooking them until they're tender, I want to add a little bit of liquid, but a liquid that's dry, that's going to really add flavor. 1/4 cup of dry vermouth. Now when adding this, I just shut off the heat so I don't have to worry about a 5-alarm fire. Once I've added the vermouth, I'll just let it simmer on the stove over a nice low heat and just kind of let those tomatoes get nice and soft and tender. I always like to add that fresh element that really takes the soup the extra distance. So I peeled a few shallots. One of my favorite vegetables because they just have a natural sweetness, but they also bring that little oniony bite to the table. They're really versatile. I have to tell you, I grew up in Midtown Manhattan, and on the corner, there was a pub. It was called Mulligan's. It was kind of dark and scary and gloomy, and it had all these amazing smells. Brisket cooking, stroganoff, braised chicken. Scary? Yes. Exciting? Yes. To a young girl walking by, something strangely enticing about the pub. And I think that's where I developed my association with pub food, the weather, a certain mood. So with the 3 shallots, I'm chopping up 10 cloves of garlic. And I'll just take that, swoop it right up, and go into the pot. Add a pinch of chili flakes, a 1/4 teaspoon, and that's just enough to give it a little kick without being spicy. And a tablespoon of oregano, a pinch of white pepper, and a pinch of salt, just to start drawing the water out of those garlic slices and shallots. A little stir with a wooden spoon, shallots, the garlic, take a little nose bath, take a minute to smell the flowers and enjoy this. Once this starts to kind of caramelize and cook down, get a little translucent and a little brown, that's when I want to add the canned tomatoes. And I just add 1 can of peeled tomatoes. So the peeled tomatoes are cooked already, so they have a developed sweetness from being cooked that the fresh don't have. And that's why I like to use half and half. The acidic freshness of the fresh tomatoes, and then the more developed sweetness of the canned. But whenever I make a soup like this, there's never enough liquid. Let's add a little water. And to this, I'll add a little bit less sugar, 1 teaspoon. So now I have the 2 halves of my soup cooking. Now this is the kind of soup that I'm gonna put in a crock. After I've poured this delicious combination of fresh and canned tomatoes into my crock, I want there to be that extra layer of bone-warming comfort. So I always turn to a loaf of sourdough bread for that. And I just tear a piece of the sourdough bread, and it has to be enough so that it can perch on top and overlap just a little bit. I'm gonna just toast those pieces of bread at 375 degrees until they get all crunchy. I'll pop these in the oven dry. I don't wanna put any olive oil or butter or anything on that bread because I wanna maximize the crispiness by making it dry, because I wanna top it with some fresh mozzarella that I will just break into small pieces. I like to use some fresh mozzarella for this. It has a really clean taste, which picks up on the fresh tomatoes we use in the base of our soup. And when the toast is ready and that soup goes in these ramekins, the cheese melts, we are gonna be transported to a Midtown pub for the ultimate comfort moment. So I've let these tomatoes cook down on the stove until they're nice and tender, and you can see that wonderful fresh tomato pulp there, combined with the charred aspect of the skin. Now, as you crush these, you'll see you'll get this wonderful liquid, the combination of the juice from the tomatoes, the cooking liquids, some seeds, some charred skin. This is an essential part of this soup's uniqueness. Once these are crushed up a little, we come to the other part of the soup, part 2, the sliced garlic, the shallots, and the canned tomatoes. And this is sort of like the roaring ocean, and this is the nice calm bay, and we're combining them. I'm only gonna puree the fresh tomatoes so that that wonderful charred taste goes all through the soup. Pop that in the blender. Now for that combining of the two parts. And this is really the final step in this soup. Just stir that right in there. And then taste it. I get that charred taste, that hint of chili flake. Sometimes I add just a touch of olive oil at the end just to round it out a little bit. Just pour that olive oil right in. Just a little bit. I kind of don't want it to get completely mixed in. Just leave it a little bit separated so it has that wonderful rich gloss on top. In the meantime, I have this wonderful charred tomato soup, that bread that I so delicately and precisely measured, and then that cheese perched on top. And now I'll just pop these in the oven under the broiler and let that cheese get all melty and fantastic.